Welcome back to FOGMAN Stories, a channel dedicated to true ghost stories, chilling encounters, and the lingering mysteries that some people carry for the rest of their lives. Life isn't always about peaceful days. Sometimes, it's about the nights, when the darkness starts to whisper. It's about those spiritual experiences that never leave you. If you're someone who's drawn to the unknown, to the sound in the attic, the shadow at the door, the moment when the ordinary turns into something unexplainable, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you won't miss any of our haunting tales. Thank you for being here with FOGMAN Stories. Now, let's begin. Story 1. Hey everyone. This is the channel where we dive into real ghost stories, chilling encounters, and all the strange things that people have experienced but couldn't quite explain. Life's full of mysteries, and sometimes, those mysteries come knocking when you least expect them. Alright, let's jump into today's story. Hi there, I'm just an ordinary guy. Nothing special. I don't go ghost hunting or anything like that. I'm not really into the paranormal. Or at least I wasn't, until something weird happened one evening that I still can't explain. And believe me, I've tried. So this story happened back when I was still living in my cousin's basement in a small town called Elridge, somewhere in upstate New York. It was 2007. And I had just gotten one of those clunky old webcams, you know. The kind that sat on top of your monitor and looked like a tiny robot eye. Anyway, one night, my friend Jacob came over. We were bored, just hanging out, listening to music, and talking nonsense like usual. I had just set up my webcam earlier that week, and we figured it'd be fun to mess around with it. Take a few pictures, maybe even make a goofy video. I remember it was cold outside. Real cold. The kind of night where the windows fog up from the inside. And the basement felt a little damper than usual. The basement itself wasn't anything fancy, unfinished walls with exposed insulation. A mini fridge in the corner. A beat-up old couch. And a bunch of random junk my cousin had stored over the years. So we started taking pictures. I sat in the swivel chair in front of the computer, and Jacob stood behind me, making faces and throwing up peace signs. We probably took 30, maybe even more, just clicking away and laughing like idiots. After we were done, we pulled up the folder to look through them, hoping to find one where I didn't look half asleep or where Jacob wasn't mid-sneeze. That's when Jacob suddenly stopped laughing and leaned in close to the screen. "Yo," he said, his voice going kind of low. "Go back. That one. Yeah, that one. Go back to it." I scrolled back. The room went real quiet. Right there, in the picture, just over my left shoulder, was something. Someone? It wasn't Jacob. He was on the other side. And whatever this was, it was right next to me. You could clearly make out long hair, stringy, dark, almost wet looking. There were eyes, wide and kind of empty. A nose, a mouth that looked wrong, twisted, like it was stuck between a grin and a scream. My first thought was, no way. It had to be a glitch. Right? Webcams mess up all the time. Maybe the frame overlapped. Maybe it caught Jacob mid-movement. But we hadn't been moving. We were both still when that picture was taken. We sat there for a good 10 minutes. Just staring at it, trying to come up with some logical explanation. The background was the same in every shot. The insulation, the fridge, a stack of pizza boxes. Nothing ever changed. Except that one photo. And the weirdest part? The lighting on that thing. It didn't match the rest of the room. It looked darker, like it was lit from somewhere else. Somewhere not here. We freaked out. Obviously. Jacob started pacing, running his hands through his hair. I felt this chill crawl up my spine. I deleted the photo. I know, I shouldn't have. But at that moment, I just didn't want that thing on my computer. I didn't even want to look at the screen anymore. After that night, I started taking more pictures with the webcam, just to see if anything else would show up. I did it alone, mostly. Sometimes late at night, sometimes with the lights off, sometimes with them on. Nothing. Not a single weird shadow. Not a single ghostly figure. Just me and that same ugly wall. It never happened again. Jacob wouldn't even come over for a while. He told a few people about it. But without the picture, nobody really believed us. They said we were probably high or just seeing things. But we weren't. And here's something I didn't tell anyone. For weeks after that, I felt like I was being watched. Not all the time. Just sometimes. Like when I was brushing my teeth. Or getting dressed. Or lying in bed with the lights out. You know that feeling you get when you know someone's behind you. But when you turn around, there's nothing there? That feeling. I moved out a couple months later. Not because of the picture, I mean. Life just moved on. I got a new job. Started saving for my own place. But I never forgot that night. To this day, I still don't know what we saw. A ghost? A trick of the light? Some kind of glitch? All I know is, something was there, and it wasn't supposed to be. Some stories don't need a big dramatic ending to stay with you. This one? It's stuck with me all these years because it didn't try to scare me. It just was. It happened. I don't know what that thing in the photo was. But I know it wasn't part of the plan. We were just messing around. Having fun. And somehow, we caught a glimpse of something that didn't belong. Maybe it was a ghost. Maybe it was something else. But it was there. And that's enough. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed true ghost encounters and chilling tales like this, don't forget to subscribe to FOGMAN Stories. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. And let me know in the comments if you've ever seen something in a photo that wasn't supposed to be there. Stay safe out there. And remember, sometimes, the camera catches more than just a smile. Hi friends. Welcome back. Alright, let's jump into tonight's story. This is a very real tale. About strange paranormal events that happened in an apartment that once seemed totally normal. Until chilling things started happening one after another. I'm gonna tell you what happened to me. Plain and simple. Just the way I experienced it. I ain't trying to make it fancier than it was. I just want y'all to hear what we went through. My name's Linda. And I've lived in this apartment with my daughter, Katie, for about 5 years now. It's a modest little place in the outskirts of Maplewood, Ohio. Nothing special. Just a 2-bedroom unit in a quiet complex. Or at least, it used to be quiet. At first, it was just the normal stuff, the occasional creaks. Weird plumbing noises. You know, stuff you could write off. But then, little by little, things started getting off. It started maybe 2 years ago. But in the past year, it's like something in the apartment changed. Or woke up. Katie and I had this little routine where we'd curl up in my bed and watch TV after dinner. A mother-daughter thing. A few times, while we were watching, we'd feel these soft thumps on the mattress. like someone was knocking from underneath the bed. At first, I thought it might be our cat, Mr. Tibbles, but every time it happened, he'd be curled up at the foot of the bed, dead asleep. It didn't stop there. I've heard footsteps, not the soft kind, but clear, deliberate ones, walking through the living room when no one else was home. They'd always stop just before I could get a good look. It was like someone was walking right up to the doorway, then vanishing. One night, about a year ago, I was sleeping when I felt arms, actual arms, wrap around my waist. Not like a breeze or dream or anything subtle. These were warm, firm arms. I could feel the pressure of them against my stomach and back. It didn't feel violent, but it sure didn't feel right. It was one of the most confusing moments of my life. I lay there stiff as a board until the feeling faded. We started noticing other little things too. My bedroom fan would act up randomly. Some nights it worked fine. Other nights it made this whining sound and refused to pick up speed. Then there was the stove. About 2 weeks ago, it started ticking, just out of nowhere, like the timer was stuck. A day later, the ticking got faster and louder, non-stop, like it was trying to scream at us. I called maintenance, but they couldn't find anything wrong. Then suddenly, it just stopped, like whatever it was had lost interest. Things came to a head one night last week. I was asleep and suddenly felt a sharp grip around my legs, from my feet up to my knees, and they started shaking. Like someone was trying to wake me up. Rough. I couldn't move. I could hear myself whimpering, almost crying, but it was like I was stuck between sleep and wakefulness. When I finally did wake up, I could move just fine. But the fear? That stayed with me. And it didn't stop. 2 nights ago, I was up late on the computer. Around 2 a.m., Katie was asleep. I heard footsteps again, but this time, right next to me, right in the living room. I could hear them coming closer, each step clear on the wooden floor. I stood up, heart pounding, thinking I was about to see someone step around the corner. I even whispered, "Who's there?" But no one ever showed. The steps just stopped. Then last night happened. After all this, I still tried to sleep in my bed. Katie was with me, like always. I remember feeling anxious, but I thought maybe I was just tired and overthinking. Well, I wasn't. Not long after I lay down, I felt someone grab chunks of my hair. Not gently, hard pulls, quick and sharp. It yanked me half awake and I remember trying to swat at my own hair. I was whispering Katie's name, scared to raise my voice. I ended up scooting close to her, hoping her presence would keep whatever this was away. Honestly, I don't even remember falling asleep again. Maybe I never really woke up in the first place. That's the worst part. And then there was last night's final straw. I went to bed with the TV on. I'd read somewhere that keeping the light or noise going might keep spirits away. I guess I was desperate enough to try anything. I had a dream, a vivid one, where I felt this presence again, crawling all over my bed. I remember screaming at it to leave me alone. And then, out of nowhere, I told it to go to the light. It was just something I'd heard once on TV. I told it again, "Go to the light," and added, "I forgive you. Don't be afraid." I woke up in a cold sweat. I turned the bedroom light on, sat up, turned the TV volume up too. I was done with whatever that was. But then, I heard something move in the bathroom. A very clear, scraping sound, like glass sliding across tile. I walked in and saw the wastebasket had moved. Not fallen, moved. I pushed it back to its usual spot. Waited a few minutes. then moved it back to where I'd found it after the sound, just to double check myself. And yes, no question, it had moved. I'm starting to think whatever is in this apartment is mad now. Like it knows I'm resisting. For the past few nights, the light and the TV kept things at bay. But last night, it didn't matter anymore. It still came. I don't think it wants to hurt me, but it scares the hell out of me. I get the feeling it's a man. Or it was. And maybe, just maybe, it isn't evil, but it ain't at peace either. I don't know what to think anymore. I used to brush these things off. But now, with everything that's happened, I feel like I'm not alone in that apartment. Whether it's a spirit needing help, or something else entirely, I just wanted to find peace, so I can have mine too. Thanks for listening, y'all. If you've ever experienced anything like this, feel free to share in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. See y'all real soon. Story 3. Hi everyone. Now let's get into today's story. This is a true story. One of those that makes you question what's real and what isn't. I'm not here to convince anyone. Just to share what happened to me and what followed after. So, let's dive in. This all started one night when I randomly woke up around 3 a.m. I don't remember having any weird dreams or anything like that before I opened my eyes. I was just lying there, wide awake for no reason. So, like anyone else who can't fall back asleep, I grabbed my headphones and started listening to music to pass the time. Everything was normal at first. The soft hum of the music was comforting. But then, out of nowhere, I heard this deep voice. Like someone was right next to me. It said, "Don't disturb the dreams of others or I will come for you." I froze. I literally couldn't move. I thought maybe it was something in the song. So I paused the music, but the voice didn't come from the headphones. It came from inside the room. I couldn't see anyone, but I had that cold, creeping feeling like someone was staring right at me. I kept thinking to myself, "Don't make a sound. Don't wake anyone up. Don't even breathe too hard." I was terrified. Then the voice came back. Louder this time, like it was angry. "You did it." My eyes darted to the door. That's when I saw her. There was a girl standing in the doorway. She didn't rush at me or anything. She moved super slowly, almost like she was floating. But her feet were definitely touching the ground. She didn't look like some stereotypical ghost. She looked like a real person. But something about her just wasn't right. And here's the worst part. I couldn't move. Not an inch. My arms were crossed over my chest. And it felt like they were glued there. I couldn't scream. Couldn't blink. Couldn't breathe properly. She just kept coming closer. Inch by inch. Then, she disappeared. Just vanished. But a second later, boom, she was back. Standing closer this time. And every time she disappeared and reappeared, she got closer and closer. Until she was almost at the edge of the bed. And still, I couldn't move. Eventually, she vanished completely. The room felt lighter again. I sat up, sweating, still in shock. And no matter how many times I've tried to convince myself it was sleep paralysis or a dream, I know I was awake. I know what I heard. And I know what I saw. Fast forward about 3 weeks later. I went to visit my sister and her husband. It was Friday night, and we were celebrating his birthday a few days early since they'd be working during the week. At one point in the night, I wandered into their spare room to lie down. No one else was in there. and I fell asleep on the floor with my headphones on. Around 11:30 p.m., my parents woke me up, and we all went home. Nothing weird happened that night, but I didn't see my sister and her husband again until Monday, and that's when things got even stranger. Without me saying a single word about what had happened to me 3 weeks earlier, my sister started telling me that weird things had been going on in their apartment all week. She said her husband had woken up several times feeling like something heavy was pressing down on him. He couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even wake her up, and she said that one night, she saw a girl standing near the bedroom door. They both said the same thing, different nights. Same girl. And here's what really chilled me. My sister mentioned that her husband's arms were crossed over his chest while he was frozen, just like mine had been. At that point, I was convinced this wasn't a dream. It was something real, something that followed me, or maybe spread through me. A few days later, I traveled to my hometown. A 12-hour drive. Most of my family lives there. So we went to stay with my cousin for a bit. My dad was exhausted from the trip, so he crashed on the couch, and I slept in the guest room with my cousin. Guess what I did before sleeping? Yeah, music again. My way of tuning out the world. The next morning, we packed up and went to Mexico to visit more family. Stayed there a couple of days. But when we returned to my cousin's house, he pulled me aside and asked if I'd seen anything weird in his room. I said no, not really. Then he told me he'd been seeing a girl. Not just any girl, the girl. He described her movements, her face, even the way she stared. I didn't even know how to respond. I hadn't told him a thing. There's no way he could have made that up. It's hard to explain how something like this spreads. Maybe it's some kind of spirit that attaches itself to people when they're vulnerable. Maybe playing music while half asleep opens a door. I don't really know. But after everything that happened, I knew I wasn't the only one affected. That girl, whatever she is, didn't want to be disturbed. And I guess I did just that. Looking back now, I still get goosebumps. Some nights I lay awake wondering if she'll show up again. I never listen to music while falling asleep anymore. Not after that. This story isn't about proving anything. It's just a reminder that sometimes, the things we don't believe in might just be waiting for us in the quiet hours of the night. Thanks for sticking around. If you've ever had something strange happen to you, don't ignore it, and maybe, just maybe, don't disturb the dreams of others. See you in the next story. And if you enjoyed this one, don't forget to subscribe to FOGMAN Stories. Good night, and sleep tight. Story 4. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I hope y'all are doing good today. You ever been to a sleepover and left with a memory you just can't shake? Not because of the fun or the snacks, but because something strange happened? Well, let me tell y'all a story that's been stuck in my head for years now. Grab a blanket, turn off some lights if you're brave enough, and let's get into it. It all started when my best friend, Rachel, moved into this really old house right behind a post office in a small southern town called Millstone. The house looked kinda cool from the outside, real tall windows, a crooked porch, peeling white paint, but once you stepped inside, you could feel something different. Not scary right away, just heavy, the kind of quiet that hums in your ears. Now, the first time I went over was for her birthday party. We were all around 10 or 11 years old. Just some kids looking to have fun. I remember it like it was yesterday. We all showed up with presents, sleeping bags, And way too much candy. And the very first thing Rachel wanted to do was tell us the story behind the house. She said the place was at least 115 years old, and back in the day. It had these hidden slave passageways, narrow little tunnels built into the walls and floors. Most of them had been boarded up over time, but one of them was still open. This one ran right through her bedroom closet and connected to her stepsister's room next door. We thought she was just trying to spook us. But then she opened the closet door, and yeah, there it was, a little passage, dark and narrow, like something out of a movie. That night, there were 6 of us girls, me, Rachel, Cassie, Lena, Tasha, and Shelley, plus Rachel's older sister, Candace, who was around 16 and too cool to be scared of anything. We stayed up late telling ghost stories, giggling, and daring each other to go into the closet tunnel. Nobody did, of course. Later on, we snuck downstairs to grab more candy, giant bags of Skittles, gummy worms, you name it. Her parents were asleep on the couch with the TV still on. And we tiptoed past like little ninjas. Once we got back upstairs, we decided to all squeeze into Candace's room because it was the warmest. Her room was cluttered and barely had space for us, but it felt cozy. We were trying to figure out what game to play next when Shelley got this idea to dress up like a spy. She grabbed a black hoodie and ducked into the bathroom to change. The rest of us started arguing about whether we should prank call someone or play truth or dare. Then we heard footsteps in Rachel's room. It wasn't loud, just soft shuffling, like someone pacing back and forth. We thought it was Shelley. But then, right as I stepped out to check, she opened the bathroom door and looked at us wide-eyed. "Did y'all hear that?" she asked. She said she'd heard someone walking in the bedroom too. I told her we thought it was her. But when we peeked into Rachel's room, it was empty. The lights were off. The only thing in there besides her furniture were her 2 pet rats, scurrying in their cage. That's when things started to feel off. Rachel went to check the closet. The tunnel was still open, but no one had touched it. Still, we all pressed our ears to the closet door to listen through the passage. Nothing. Then we heard a faint tap from inside the wall. Not loud, not aggressive, just a tap, then another, then a dragging sound, like something, or someone, crawling through the tunnel. We screamed, grabbed our sleeping bags, and booked it downstairs to the living room. Candace tried to act like she wasn't scared, but even she looked pale. We ended up camping out in the living room that night. None of us slept much. Every creak in the house made us jump. Around 4 a.m., we heard a loud thump upstairs, followed by the sound of footsteps running down the hallway. Rachel's dad got up, looked around, but didn't find anything. He told us it was probably an old pipe or something settling. But we knew better. A few weeks later, Rachel's family moved, said it was because of her dad's job. But Rachel told me in private that they couldn't handle the weird stuff anymore. Doors would open by themselves. Lights flickered even after they replaced the wiring. And Rachel swore she saw a face in the tunnel once, just for a second, before it vanished. I haven't been back to that house since. Don't even know if anyone lives there now. But I'll never forget that night. That tap, that slow dragging sound in the wall, makes you wonder what's hiding behind old closet doors. Huh? Looking back, I still get chills thinking about it. Maybe it was just our imagination running wild that night. But when I remember the fear in Shelley's voice, or the look on Candace's face, I'm not so sure. Some places carry memories, Others carry something else. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever experienced anything like this, drop a comment and let's talk about it. And hey, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next creepy tale. See y'all soon. Story 5. Hey everyone. Welcome back to another story here on FOGMAN. Grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let me tell you a tale that still gives me the chills to this day. This one ain't something I read online or heard from a friend of a friend. It's something that happened in my own family. So buckle up, 'cause this one's real, and it's spooky. This story takes place down in a quiet little town in Barlow County, Mississippi. Now, I grew up spending summers at my grandma's house there. You know, the kind of house with creaky floors, old wallpaper, and the smell of sweet tea always in the air. To most folks, it looked like any regular southern home. But for those of us who lived there, we knew it wasn't just the floorboards creaking. When I was a kid, I remember seeing strange things in that house. Not every day, and not all the time, but enough to stick in my memory. Like shadows where there shouldn't be any. Whispers in the hallway when no one was around. And the feeling. Man. That feeling. Like someone was always watching you. I never thought much of it back then. I figured it was just my imagination. But years went by, and the house stayed in the family. My Aunt Marla and her husband Rick moved in after Grandma passed. That's when things started getting real weird. Marla told me once, late at night, that she'd feel someone wrap an arm around her while she was in bed. But the thing is, Rick was out working night shifts at the factory when it happened. She thought she was dreaming the first time. Then it happened again, and again. At first, they kept it to themselves. But small things started happening around the house. The toilet would flush by itself. Doors would shut on their own. And during Halloween, you could hear what sounded like little kids running through the halls, laughing and talking. They didn't have kids back then, so that was a whole other level of creepy. Fast forward a few years, and now they have 3 kids. And let me tell you, the ghostly stuff, it's like it got stronger. Their oldest son, Benny, he once screamed in the middle of the night. Said he saw his daddy's head floating in the closet. Not his body, just his head. And Rick was asleep in the bed next to him. You think that's the scariest part? Nah, it gets worse. Now every time I visit that house, I make it a point to take pictures. Not just of the house, but with the kids in the frame. And I ain't lying when I say this. Every picture shows orbs. Not 1 or 2, sometimes 50 or more. I thought maybe it was dust or light tricks. But here's the kicker. I've been taking photos for years. Thousands of them. And I ain't never seen a single orb in any other picture. Only at that house. Just last week, I took about 50 pictures. I enlarged the orbs, just out of curiosity, and each one had a face in it. Not all clear, some were just blurry shapes. But some, you could see eyes, mouths, even expressions. One looked like an old man with a wide brim hat. Another looked like a little girl. One had a grin so wide, I couldn't sleep that night. I started digging into the history of the house. Turns out, back in the early 1900s, that land used to be part of an old orphanage, burned down in a fire, killing several children and a caretaker. Nobody ever rebuilt on it until my great-grandpa put the house there. It's like those spirits never left. One evening, while helping Marla clean out the attic, we found a small wooden box. Inside were old letters, photographs, and a journal. The journal belonged to a girl named Elsie, one of the orphans who lived there. Her final entry was chilling. Mr. Greaves came again last night. I heard Tommy crying. He never cries unless it's bad. I prayed and prayed, but the fire came anyway. I think I'm going to heaven soon. Maybe I'll see Mama. That same night, the lights in the attic blew out, and the temperature dropped so low you could see your breath. We didn't stay up there long. Ever since then, the activity's gotten worse. Benny says he sees Elsie sometimes in the hallway. Their youngest, Mila, started talking to someone named Tommy, who lives in the walls. Marla and Rick are trying to act like it's all just kids and imagination. But I know better. I've seen the faces. I've heard the whispers. And last time I stayed over, I woke up with scratches on my back that weren't there when I went to sleep. I've tried blessing the place. Brought a preacher. Burned sage. Nothing worked. So now I'm doing the only thing left, sharing this story. Maybe someone out there knows what these orbs mean. Maybe someone has seen these faces before. All I know is, I'm not giving up until I figure out what's going on. Thanks for sticking with me through this story. If you've had something like this happen to you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And hey, if you enjoy stories like these, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. More tales are coming soon. And trust me, they're only getting stranger. Take care, and keep your lights on at night. Story 6. Welcome to FOGMAN Stories. Tonight, I'm sharing a story that might sound simple at first. But when you place yourself in the shoes of the one who lived it, you'll feel the chill crawl up your spine. This tale comes straight from someone who experienced it firsthand, and I've rewritten it FOGMAN style. For those of you who love a good eerie tale filled with emotion and just a hint of sadness. I was 11 when it happened. It all started at my cousin Emily's birthday party, held in this creaky old house in a quiet part of Connecticut. I remember that day so clearly, the sweet scent of chocolate cake, the off-key birthday song, and the echo of laughter bouncing off old wooden floors. It was just us kids for the most part, running around and playing hide and seek while the adults chatted in the kitchen. After we were done with the cake and games, Emily dragged me and a couple of our other cousins into her room. It was a cozy little space with faded yellow wallpaper, a small window with lace curtains, and a huge antique mirror leaning against the wall. That mirror always stood out to me, ornate, with curling gold designs around the edges, like it belonged in a castle or something. About 20 minutes into playing, I happened to glance toward that mirror, and that's when I saw her. A little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Pale skin, long blonde hair that almost shimmered white in the light, and a plain white dress that looked like it belonged to another century. The strange thing was, she wasn't playing with us. She wasn't even in the room. She was just in the mirror, staring at me with a calm, curious look. My blood ran cold. At first I thought it was a trick of the light. Maybe one of the other girls? But no, none of my cousins looked like that. I was the only blonde in the room. And her hair, it was almost glowing. My heart started racing. I blinked. She was gone. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't want to sound crazy. But after we left the room, I pulled my Uncle Jack aside. He was Emily's dad, and the kind of guy who always had a story or two to tell. But when I asked him if anything bad had ever happened in that house, His smile faded. His eyes narrowed a bit. "Why do you ask?" he said. I hesitated, then told him about the girl in the mirror. He looked at me for a long time, like he was deciding what to say. Then he sighed. "This house is very old," he said, "but don't worry. If you saw what I think you saw, she wouldn't hurt you." He didn't elaborate. I was too freaked out to stay the night. My parents came to pick me up not long after that. As we drove away, I kept glancing back at the upstairs window, half expecting to see her face looking out. 2 years went by. I didn't visit that house again. I made excuses, said I was busy. Truth was, I just didn't want to see that mirror again. But when I turned 13, Uncle Jack and Emily had to move out. He couldn't keep up with the rent anymore, and they were downsizing to an apartment. Emily called me and asked if I could help pack. I hesitated, but eventually said yes. I figured enough time had passed. The house looked even older than I remembered. Cracks in the walls, dust everywhere, the air heavy like it hadn't been breathed in for weeks. We started packing things up, books, clothes, knick-knacks. It was a strange feeling. Seeing a place once so full of life now reduced to cardboard boxes and silence. When we finally got to Emily's room, the mirror was still there. "Hey," I asked her, trying to sound casual, "have you seen anything weird in here lately?" She shook her head. "Not really." "Why?" "No reason. Just wondering." We finished packing her bed and were about to grab the last of the boxes when I looked up. And there she was. The girl. In the mirror. She hadn't changed a bit. Still the same white dress. The same pale hair. But this time, she was smiling. She lifted one small hand and waved at me slowly. I froze. My hand lifted almost by itself. And I waved back. "What are you doing?" Emily asked, frowning. I turned to her, saying goodbye. She looked at the mirror, then at me, and gave a little smile. We walked out of the room together, leaving the mirror behind. I was relieved they were leaving that place. But a part of me, a strange part, felt sad. Like I was leaving someone behind who had waited to be seen. I never told anyone else about it. Most people would just laugh, or say I imagined it. But I know what I saw. And if you've ever had something like this happen to you, you know too. Sometimes spirits aren't loud. They don't slam doors or whisper your name at night. Sometimes, they just wait. In silence, in mirrors, in memories. And sometimes, all they want is to be seen. I hope she found peace when that house emptied out. I hope, maybe, someone else will see her again. But next time, I'll stay away from antique mirrors. There's something deeply unsettling about innocence trapped in time. The little girl in the mirror never spoke, never moved beyond a wave. But her presence lingered like a forgotten whisper. What haunts me the most is not the fear I felt, but the sadness in her eyes. Like she wanted someone, anyone, to acknowledge her existence. Stories like this remind us that some energies don't just fade. They echo. And maybe, just maybe, that's why we keep looking back at mirrors. Hoping not to see ourselves, but something more. Story 7. Hey everyone. Welcome back to the channel. It's your buddy here again. And today I've got one heck of a story for y'all. This one gave me chills even as I was writing it down. You ever feel like your own house is hiding something? Like, deep down in the walls or the floors. There's something watching, something listening? Well, this story right here, It might just make you think twice before going down to your basement at night. So grab a drink, turn off the lights if you dare, and let me tell you what happened to me and my cousin not too long ago. My name's Dean, and I grew up in a quiet little town in Pennsylvania. Not much ever happened there, and that's just how most of us liked it. But if there's one thing folks around here always say, it's that old houses have memories. And sometimes, those memories don't like being forgotten. The house we lived in wasn't that old, maybe 50 years or so. But it had this weird, unsettled feeling to it, especially down in the basement. My dad, Mike, he never talked much about weird stuff. Always the practical type. But one night, he came upstairs from the basement looking pale like he'd seen a ghost. He sat down on the couch, real quiet for a while, and then he said, "Dean, I heard voices down there. They were talking about my life. Like someone was narrating it. Every little detail, stuff I haven't told anybody." That alone was enough to make my hair stand up. But I didn't think too much of it at the time. Maybe he was tired. Or his mind was playing tricks on him. You know how it goes. But then my cousin Jess came over for the weekend. Jess is the curious type, loves the paranormal. Always watching ghost hunting videos. Carrying a little voice recorder in her backpack just in case. When I told her what my dad said, her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "We gotta go down there," she said. "Bring your camera. Let's see if we catch anything." So that night, we waited until my folks went to bed. Jess brought out her voice recorder, and I grabbed my old Canon camera. We crept down the stairs like a couple of sneaky raccoons, trying not to wake anybody up. The basement was cold, colder than it should have been for a summer night. The kind of cold that goes straight to your bones. We started taking pictures. Click, click, click. I took shots of every corner, every shadow. Jess whispered questions into the darkness like, "Is anyone here with us? And, do you want to talk to us?" At first, nothing happened. We were just about ready to pack it in when I saw something strange on the staircase. Right at the top of the handrail, there was this faint little scribble. Looked like it had been made with a pen. Maybe a marker. I leaned in real close and squinted at it. It said, "You took it off." My stomach dropped. I hadn't thought about it in years. But when we first moved in, there was this small, furry sticker shaped like a hand stuck to the wall near the stairs. It was kind of cute. In a weird way. I always figured my mom or dad had peeled it off during some cleaning spree. But now, Jess stared at it. "Did you write that?" "Nope," I said. "Swear to God." She took a picture of it. And we moved on. But something had shifted. The air felt thicker, heavier. My camera started acting weird, like the battery was dying, even though I had just charged it. A few minutes later, we reviewed the photos. That's when things got real spooky. One of the pictures we took was supposed to be just a plain shot of the basement corner. But on screen, it moved. Not a video, not a live photo, just a still image. But it moved. A shadow crept closer in the frame, and the whole picture got foggy like someone was breathing on the lens. Another shot showed the blue tarp that always hung on the far side of the basement, covering some junk, normal stuff. But the next shot, taken seconds later, showed that same tarp barely hanging on by a single strand. Nothing had touched it. We hadn't even gone near it. Jess was freaking out. "This is real, Dean. This is really happening." I wasn't ready to admit it yet. But then came the face. I had taken a picture of the back wall. When we pulled it up on my laptop, It wasn't a wall anymore. It was a face, gray, semi-transparent, but clear as day. Eyes, nose, part of a mouth, like someone had pressed their face right up to the camera and just stayed there. Jess didn't say anything for a long time. Then she whispered, "That's not dust. That's not lighting. That's someone." A few days passed. We were still rattled. Every night, the basement creaked louder. I swore I heard something shuffling down there, like bare feet on concrete. Then one night, Jess was messing around with a flashlight and a piece of printer paper. Don't ask me why. She said it was some paranormal test she saw online. She shined the flashlight on the paper, took it away, and then put it back. When the light hit the page again, a quarter of it was gone, like something had taken a bite out of the corner. No burn marks, no ash. It was just missing. And then came the voice. I was down on the old basement computer later that week, just playing games, trying to ignore the weird stuff. That's when I heard it. A voice, clear as day, right behind me. "Bradley, Bradley, Bradley." I spun around so fast I nearly fell out of the chair. No one was there, but it wasn't just in my head. I know that voice. It was an old woman's voice. I don't know anyone named Bradley. No one in my family does either. But that name's been echoing in my head ever since. So, what do y'all think? I mean, I know it sounds wild, but everything I told you actually happened to me and Jess. I still live in that house. And yeah, I still hear things sometimes when I'm down in the basement. Little whispers, breathing, a door creaking when no one else is home. I've never heard that old woman's voice again. But sometimes, I swear I feel like she's still watching me. I used to think ghosts were just made up stuff in movies. But after what we saw that week, the photos, the writing, the face, the missing piece of paper, I just can't explain it away anymore. Something is down there, and whatever it is, it remembers, it feels, and maybe, it didn't like that we disturbed it. To be honest, I haven't had the guts to take more pictures since then. So if you've got a basement, maybe give it a second look before heading down there. And if you ever find an old sticker on the wall, maybe don't take it off. Thanks for listening, and stay safe out there. Story 8. Hey everyone. Glad to have you back on the channel. Tonight, I'm gonna tell y'all something that's been sitting heavy on my chest for a long time. It's one of those memories that crawls back when you're alone. When everything gets quiet. Like when the lights are off and your brain decides it's story time whether you want it or not. I'm not here to spook you for fun. Or to make things up. This happened to me, and after you hear it, you might just think twice before stepping into a public restroom alone at night. This all happened when I was 14 years old. Back then, I was living with my mom in a small, nothing special town called Elmbrook, somewhere out in the flat part of the Midwest. It was one of those places where life just kinda drags by, strip malls. Old diners, rusty water towers, and the same people doing the same thing every day. You either fell in line or started looking for something to shake things up. I guess I was the second kind. I started hanging out with a bunch of kids who didn't really fit anywhere else. People at school called them burnouts, dopers, troublemakers, but I didn't care. They didn't judge me, and they let me drink with them, smoke with them, and laugh with them. At 14, that was all I needed. Now, across the street from our apartment building was this rundown bowling alley and bar called Kingpin Lanes. It was the kind of place that hadn't changed since the 70s, sticky floors, dim orange lights, and the smell of cheap beer soaked into everything. But it was our spot. It's where the stoners hung out, where bad decisions were made in the parking lot, and where nobody asked too many questions. One Friday night in late October, cold enough that you could see your breath but still too early for snow. Me and the crew were about to hit a party a few blocks away. We were all buzzing, a couple beers in, laughing about stupid stuff, and figuring out how to score more drinks. I needed to pee, bad, so I told the group I'd be right back and walked into Kingpin by myself. The place was half empty, a couple of old men at the bar, and some kids playing arcade games in the corner. I made my way toward the public restroom, the one by the busted Pac-Man machine. That bathroom was something else. 4 or 5 stalls, busted tile floor, dim lights flickering overhead like a horror movie set. It always smelled like cigarettes and mildew, mixed with that sour old pipe stench. I went into the 3rd stall, the one with a barely hanging on lock, and sat down. Now listen, I know it's weird to say I sat down, but I was pretty buzzed and didn't trust my aim. Just being real. Anyway, I was sitting there, trying to hurry up, when I heard something. A voice. Deep, raspy, like gravel grinding inside a metal can. It came from the stall right next to me. I'm the devil. That's all. Just those 3 words. At first, I froze. I wasn't sure if I heard it right. Maybe someone outside talking? Maybe my brain playing tricks? But the way it cut through the air, it felt directed. Personal. My heart started pounding. Every hair on my arm stood up. I sat there, barely breathing, trying to process what the hell just happened. Finally, I leaned over real slow to peek under the divider between stalls. And that's when I saw the shoes. Black, women's pumps. Clean, shiny, almost fancy looking. Definitely not something you'd expect in a dump like this. But there they were, just sitting still. No sound, no movement, no shuffling. Whoever it was, they didn't even twitch. And then, just like that, the shoes stepped back. I heard the stall door creak open. I couldn't bring myself to look up. I just stared at the floor as the sound of the bathroom door opening and closing echoed behind her. That's it. She was gone. Never said another word. Never made another sound. I sat there like a statue. My legs were numb. I couldn't move. I didn't even finish peeing. I finally stood up, hands shaking, and walked out like a ghost. Didn't wash my hands. Didn't look in the mirror. When I got back outside, the others were still joking around like nothing happened. I didn't say a word. I just lit a cigarette and pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was rattled to my core. For weeks after that, I couldn't walk past Kingpin without feeling a chill crawl down my back. I avoided that bathroom like the plague. Even transferred to a different friend group not long after. I couldn't explain why. I just knew I didn't feel right anymore. Years passed. I moved away, got a job, grew up, but I never forgot that voice. Even now, sometimes when I'm in a public restroom and it's quiet, I swear I can still hear it. Just in the back of my mind. I'm the devil. And that's the truth. Believe what you want, but I know what I heard. Sometimes the scariest part of a story isn't what happens, it's what doesn't. No explanation, no reason, just a moment that shouldn't exist. But it does, and it stays with you. Was it someone playing a trick? A hallucination? Or something darker? All I know is that I've never been the same. Story 9. Hey there, friends. Thanks for stopping by the channel again. Fogman's got another spooky one for you tonight. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes it ain't the loudest noises that get you. It's the quiet ones. The kind that sneak up on you when you least expect it. This story? This one's been stuck in my head since I first heard it. It's not some wild haunted mansion story or anything too fancy. Nope. It's about a kid, just 9 years old, living with his family in a basement apartment. What happened to him that night? Well, let's just say it was enough to keep him looking over his shoulder for years. So go ahead, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and listen close. You ready? 'Cause this one's gonna stay with you. You ever had a night that just stuck with you? Like, no matter how old you get, how far you move on in life, there's just that one night that creeps back into your mind when things get too quiet. Well, this is mine. Back then, I was just a kid, 9 years old, living with my mom and sister in a basement apartment out in a quiet little town called Fairview, Ohio. Not much happened around there. It was the kinda place where you knew your neighbors, and folks kept their doors unlocked during the day. You know, simple living. Our place was small, just 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that barely fit a table, and a living room that doubled as my play area. But it was home. We lived in the basement level of a 3-story building, so our front door opened to a short stairwell that led up to the main hallway. It wasn't much to look at, but it was cozy. That night started out like any other. I was lying on my bed, watching TV with the volume turned down low so I wouldn't wake Mom. The light from the screen flickered across the walls, and the hum of the heater was the only other sound in the room. And then, I heard it, a soft thump, nothing loud, just enough to make me glance toward the door. I didn't think much of it. Maybe something fell upstairs, or the heater knocked something loose. I turned back to the TV. Figured it was nothing. But not even 10 seconds later, there was a knock at the door. Not loud, just a couple of quick knocks. Tap tap. I figured maybe it was my sister's boyfriend, Tommy, playing around. He did that sometimes, liked to show up late and mess with us. So I got up, still half watching the TV over my shoulder, and opened the door. Nobody was there. Now, like I said, we lived in a basement unit, so to even get to our front door, you'd have to come down the short flight of concrete stairs. And once you stepped back from our door, there was a big brick wall right in front of you. No real place to hide. Still, I stepped up the stairs and peeked my head out into the hallway above. Empty. No footsteps. No voices. No doors shutting. Just quiet. I stood there for a second, confused, then called out, "Tommy, that you?" Nothing. After another minute, I shrugged it off and went back inside. Probably just some kid playing a prank or something. I shut the door, turned the lock, and sat back on my bed. The cartoon I'd been watching had gone to commercial, and I remember flipping the channel to something else, some old comedy show rerun. Just as I started getting comfortable again, knock knock, another noise. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the door. It was behind me. I froze, slowly turned around, and that's when I saw her, floating, right there, at the far corner of my room. A woman, hovering just inches above the floor. No legs, just the bottom of a long, gray dress that seemed to move even though there was no breeze. She had long, black hair that hung down past her shoulders, and her skin looked wrong, pale, almost gray like the dress. But what I remember most, what still gives me chills even now, were her eyes. Red, glowing, and locked right onto mine. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. It was like my throat closed up, frozen tight with fear. I couldn't move, couldn't blink. I just sat there, staring at her while she stared right back. She didn't say a word, just floated there, watching me. Her eyes weren't just red, they looked like they were glowing from the inside, like embers in a dying fire. And her face, there was something hollow about it. Not just pale, but empty, like the part of her that used to be human had left a long time ago. I don't know how long I sat like that. It could have been seconds, could have been minutes. Time felt broken. Then suddenly, she was gone. I blinked, and the space where she'd been was just empty. I shot out of bed and ran straight to my mom's room. She was asleep, snoring lightly under the covers. I shook her shoulder over and over, whispering at first, then louder. "Mom, Mom, wake up, please wake up." She groaned and rolled over. "What's wrong?" "There was someone in my room," I whispered. "A woman. She was floating. She was looking at me." Mom sat up, rubbing her eyes. "What are you talking about? You had a nightmare?" "No, I was awake. I saw her. She had red eyes. She didn't have legs. Just this long gray dress, and her hair was black and..." Before I could finish, we both heard it. Knock, knock, knock. At the door. Again. This time, Mom groaned and got up. "Probably your sister." "I'm not answering it," I said, practically diving back under her blanket. She walked out of the room and headed for the door. I listened as she unlocked it and opened it. Then I heard her say, "Oh, hey." It was my sister and Tommy. They were both just arriving. I could hear their voices, laughing, and footsteps as they came in. I got out of bed and stepped into the hallway. "I thought y'all knocked on the door earlier," I said. My sister looked confused. "No, we just got here." "Why?" I looked at Tommy. He shook his head. "We parked like 2 minutes ago." Mom turned toward me with a weird look on her face. "That's strange," she said, "because you told me someone knocked before, right? And now you're saying you saw something?" "Not something," I said. "Someone. I told you. A woman." She stared at me a moment longer, then said, real quiet, I think I saw the edge of something, too. When you woke me up." I didn't want to say anything, but I thought I saw part of a dress. Just the edge of it. That made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. We all just kind of stood there, not sure what to say. After a while, everyone tried to brush it off. My sister said maybe it was a shadow. Tommy joked that maybe the TV light made me see things. But Mom didn't laugh. She didn't say much of anything after that. And me? I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed with the covers pulled up to my chin, eyes glued to every shadow in the room, every creak in the wall, every flicker of the ceiling light. Felt like she might come back. But she didn't. Not that night. For the next few days, nothing really happened. I started to think maybe it was a dream, or that my brain made it up. You know how kids are. We've got wild imaginations. But then the noises started. At first, it was just little things. Scratches on the walls when everyone was asleep. The sound of someone walking slowly in the hallway, even though the lights were off and no one was out there. One night, I heard breathing. I was lying in bed, trying to ignore the creaks and moans of the old building, when I heard it. Slow, steady breathing. like someone was standing right over me. I held my breath, tried to stay still, and it stopped. I turned the light on. Nothing there. I didn't tell Mom right away. I didn't want her to think I was making stuff up. But she started noticing things too. Things would move around the apartment. Lights would flicker. The heater would shut off in the middle of the night. And when we woke up, it was freezing cold. She never said it out loud. But I could tell she felt it too. Something was in that apartment with us. One weekend, Mom let me stay over at my friend Benny's house across town. I was so relieved. I thought maybe I'd get a good night's sleep for once. Benny and I stayed up playing video games and eating junk food. Around 11, we turned in for the night. His room was upstairs, real warm and quiet. But in the middle of the night, I woke up. I didn't know why at first. But then I saw it. The corner of his room, darker than the rest. And then she stepped out. Same gray dress, same glowing red eyes. She didn't float this time. She walked, real slow. I screamed so loud Benny fell out of bed. His parents came rushing in, turned on the lights, and she was gone. I begged Mom to come get me. When she arrived, I could see it on her face. She knew it wasn't just our apartment anymore. We moved not long after that. Mom said we needed a fresh start. I never went back to that building. But I remember one last thing. On our final night, we were packing up. Tommy was helping us carry boxes to the car. My sister was upstairs saying goodbye to her friend. I walked into my room one last time to grab my toy robot. And there she was, floating, right in the same spot as that first night. But this time, she smiled. Not a kind smile, a twisted, knowing smile, like she was saying, "I'll see you again." Then she vanished, and I haven't seen her since. But I still feel her sometimes. In my dreams, in dark corners. She's never too far. Some things don't want to be seen. But if you do see them, they don't forget you. I was only 9 when it happened. I'm 18 now, and I remember it like it was yesterday. The scariest part isn't that she was real. It's that she followed me. That she could follow anyone. So if you ever hear a knock at your door late at night, and no one's there, don't open it. Story 10. Hey there, folks. It's me again. Thanks for stopping by. You know, I've told you some strange tales on this channel. Stories that made your skin crawl. Made you turn the lights on at night. Or maybe even sleep with one eye open. But tonight's story, well, this one's different. It's the last one. Yeah, I know. It feels weird saying that out loud. But before we get into the goodbyes, I've got one last journey into the shadows to share with you. So grab a drink, pull up a chair, and listen close. This one took place in a place that was like a museum of the bizarre. A Disneyland of the dead. March 17, 2007. A Saturday night I won't forget. I joined up with the crew from HPI, Haunted and Paranormal Investigations, right here in Northern California. We all met up at a local coffee joint. A cozy Starbucks off Main Street in a town I'll call Brookdale. We had our usual pre-hunt powwow over coffee. I downed a big old caramel macchiato. Tried to shake off the jitters. I ain't gonna lie. I always get a little nervous before these things. The team that night was a solid group. Shannon McCabe, our fearless leader. Tim Hawkins, Michelle Stump, Brian Colbert, Kristen Sheely. Our researcher, Mary Cassiano, Alicia Perry, John Wachter. Our tech guy, Michelle Pakel. Another lead investigator, Julie English. And yours truly, Paul, the ghost-chasing storyteller. From the coffee shop, we caravanned over to the location. The place? An art studio tucked above an old storefront. I'll call it Studio Solace. The resident artist, a lovely woman named Lydia, welcomed us in. The building had been around since the 1930s, and she'd been living and working there for a few years. Let me tell you, this place wasn't your average studio. It was like stepping into another world. Picture this. Shelves filled with cracked porcelain dolls. Melted candles that looked like they'd been burning since the 70s. Dried roses hanging from rafters. Strange tribal masks. Religious icons from every corner of the globe. Disco balls. Voodoo charms. Punk rock posters. String lights. And bones. Yeah, real bones. The whole place was like a fever dream. One big living art piece. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Lydia sat us down and started telling us her experiences. She said the place was alive, haunted. To be exact, one night, around 10 p.m., she saw a shadow man standing in one of the side rooms. He didn't say a word, didn't move much, just stared at her, turned, and walked away into the dark. She wasn't even scared, just puzzled. During her first month there, she was painting late at night with music playing when she heard someone walking up the stairs. Loud footsteps. Clonk, 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 clear as day. She turned off the music and called out, but no one answered. When she opened the door, the stairs were empty. She checked the whole place. Locked up tight. No one could have come in. She told us about strange happenings in the kitchen. Plates flying off shelves. Utensils falling. Even a heavy cast iron pan launching across the room once. In the bathroom, people saw figures in the mirror. One of her guests thought they saw someone in there. A man in his mid-50s. Dark hair. Mediterranean look. Italian. Maybe. When they asked Lydia who else was in the apartment, well, there was no one else. That bathroom encounter? It happened more than once. And always with the same description. They started calling him Tony. Tony the Italian ghost. Another friend crashed on Lydia's couch one night. Woke up to find Tony's face inches from his own. He screamed, jumped up, but Tony vanished. There were hot spots around the studio too, not cold. Like you'd expect. These were warm, almost feverish. One visiting artist had a dream while sleeping there. In the dream, he saw 13 shadowy figures standing around him. Watching, whispering in voices he couldn't understand. He said he woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The history of Studio Solace was no less bizarre. The bottom floor used to be a restaurant in the 30s. The upper floor, where the studio was, had been a speakeasy during Prohibition, complete with hidden tunnels for escape. Later, it was a jazz club in the 50s. A brothel for a time. Even a Japanese gambling den. That explained the strange mix of energies. We started our investigation just after 9 p.m. The EMF meters were going wild in the living room. We captured dozens of orbs on video, some bright, some faint. They moved in patterns, like they were dancing. Two of our investigators felt cold breezes at their backs. Even though all the windows were shut, one of the meters spiked so hard it beeped like a smoke detector. Downstairs in the cellar, yeah, we went there too. Muddy, slippery, with broken boards and rusty nails everywhere. We found relics, a cat skull, dusty tax forms from the 1940s, broken jugs, old light fixtures, and a wooden chair that looked like it belonged in a torture chamber. Lydia said she once found a few mummified stray cats down there. That was enough cellar time for me. Oh, and I almost stepped on a black widow spider. That was my cue to leave. Back upstairs, we regrouped. One of the cameras picked up an orb floating across the room and landing right on Kristen's chest. A second later, she jumped up, said she heard something rustling right next to her ear. We reviewed the footage, and sure enough, the orb disappeared right as she reacted. We showed it to Lydia and she nodded slowly. "That's Tony," she said, like she was talking about a neighbor who stops by for coffee. We stayed there, till almost midnight, collecting footage, listening for whispers, watching shadows flicker. There was a moment, quiet, just past 11, when we all stopped and looked at each other. You could feel it, like we weren't alone, not threatening, but present. When we finally packed up and said our goodbyes, there was this strange kind of peace, like we'd all seen something we couldn't explain, and that made us feel closer, like a weird little ghost hunting family. We hugged, laughed, shared photos, and promised to stay in touch. I drove home with the radio playing. First song was Sail Away by Enya. Calming, kind of beautiful. Then the next track came on, the theme from The Exorcist. I laughed and skipped it. No need to bring that kind of energy home. There's something about places like Studio Solace. The walls remember, the objects remember, and the people, well, we just come and go. But when we stop and listen, sometimes those memories speak back. I don't know what Tony wanted. Maybe nothing. Maybe just to be seen. Or maybe Lydia's art gave him a voice when he didn't have one. All I know is that place is alive in ways most people would never understand. Well, my friends, this is it, the last story. It's been a hell of a ride sharing all these haunted tales with you. From the creaky old mansions to the graveyards with no names. I've felt your support every step of the way. You've listened, commented, shared, and helped keep these stories alive. FOGMAN Stories started as a little side thing. A way for me to tell the world about the strange and unexplained. But it became something more, a community. A family of believers, skeptics, and everyone in between. If you've enjoyed the ride, do me one last favor. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Leave a comment with your favorite episode. And most of all, keep telling stories. Because ghosts don't just haunt places. They haunt people. And maybe, just maybe, we all got a little ghost in us. Until we meet again, stay curious, stay safe, and don't forget to check behind you. FOGMAN.